What if I told you there's a Metal Gear game that's not quite canon, but still feels like the perfect bridge between the series, roots, and its future? Back in the year 2000, Konami brought tactical espionage action to the palm of your hand. It was the first Metal Gear Solid title on handheld devices, the Game Boy Color. What started here would evolve into the PSP era. Games like Metal Gear Acid with its turn-based gameplay, Portable Ops, which pushed the autonomy and freedom of stealth missions further, and of course the legendary Peace Walker, a Hideo Kojima-driven masterpiece. Peace Walker squeezed every ounce of potential out of its hardware, offering great gameplay, multiplayer, and a compelling story. But before all that, there was Metal Gear Ghost Babel, the unsung hero of Metal Gear handheld games. Kojima himself was exploring the question, what is a game? He wanted to see if Metal Gear could thrive in a sprite form on the Game Boy, which lacked the polygons of the PS1. At the same time, he was researching how to bring Metal Gear into the next generation on PlayStation 2. None other than Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, one of Kojima's finest hours that goes down as a timeless classic in media. And when you learn about the dedication put into how it was conceived, makes you respect it even more. Hideo Kojima once shared that during the development of Metal Gear Solid 2, he was so consumed by the project that he ended up losing a noticeable amount of weight. But after playing Ghost Babel, I can now understand that there's a lot of elements that was incorporated from that game, because bear in mind, Babel came out a year before the likes of Sons of Liberty. And believe it or not, there's actually quite a few influences from that game in Metal Gear Solid 2. And not just that, but many other games in the series. Metal Gear Solid 1 is where it all started with VR missions. But of course it continued in the likes of Ghost Babel and towards the likes of Metal Gear Solid 2.
Nice work.
According to Hideo Kojima, Ghost Babel came about because Konami Europe requested a Game Boy Color version of Metal Gear Solid. In Japan, it was known as Ghost Babel, but in the West it simply carried the Metal Gear Solid name. Originally the game was meant to be a port of MGS1 from the PlayStation. However, Kojima stated that he didn't want it to feel dumb or like a lesser experience for the players who had already played the original. Instead, the team approached Ghost Babel as a unique project, carefully designed to stand on its own while still honouring the series' legacy. So Ghost Babel is broken up into 13 stages, and unlike other games in the series with their more linear direct missions, this one uses distinct levels that build into the next section. Stage 1 is where it all kicks off, and right away you're greeted with that classic overhead view, a nod to the early Metal Gear games on the MSX2 and the NES. The gameplay format? It's like Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, but with a serious upgrade. It's practically on steroids here. Snake's movements are sharper, he can now move in 8 directions rather than 4, including diagonally, which feels so much more smoother than before. The screen also scrolls as you move through an area instead of using those static flip screens from the MSX days. And it doesn't stop there. You can lean into walls, tap to distract guards, and shift the camera just over Snake's back, giving it that Metal Gear Solid flavour, and sneaking through undergrowths. Speaking of MGS, most of the weapons return here, minus the sniper rifle and the Stinger missiles, so it's packed with tools for stealth fans. Codec calls are back too, letting you save and get intel from your allies. Honestly, it's fair to say Ghost Babel feels like playing the MSX games, but just way better. The movement alone makes it stand out, and those charming early Nintendo style graphics are a welcome break from the eye-blistering visuals we're used to seeing today. The codec calls in Ghost Babel are just as engaging as ever, carrying over the iconic Metal Gear Solid style, but this time Snake has a far more bigger support team to work with. Of course we have familiar faces like Colonel Campbell and Mei Ling offering intel and guidance, but alongside them are brand new characters who really flesh out the mission. We have Weasel, a veteran mercenary and one of the most resourceful soldiers of fortune in the world. Despite being semi-retired, he's well connected, staying up to date on global mercenary operations, filling in a role similar to Kazuhiro Miller from Metal Gear 2. Then there's McBride, the director of operations for the CIA's African desk, who joined Snake's support team during the Galuade incident. And finally we meet Sergeant Christine Chris Jenner, the last surviving member of Delta Force. She worked alongside Snake during the mission, acting as a resistant ally, much like Diane from the original Metal Gear. In classic MGS fashion, each of these characters plays a big role during the codec calls, offering everything from tactical advice to bits of world building and character development. It's a support team that feels fresh, while still capturing the charm of what makes Metal Gear so engaging. Stage 2 is where the mission really kicks off. Patrols step up their game, moving more attentively and glancing in different directions, though thankfully they're not as hyper-reactive as the Genome soldiers from Metal Gear Solid. Those guys were way too alert. What really starts to shine here is Ghost Babel's level design. The structures and the routes feel smartly laid out, rewarding exploration with some cool bonus items like the suppressor for your handgun. Now speaking of handguns, the game does something interesting. Usually in MGS we're rocking classics like the M1911 Colt, the M9 or the MK23, but here Snake wields the 5.7, a sleek unique choice we wouldn't see again until MGS 4. For a game running on such modest hardware as a processor with 8-bit and just 32 kilobytes of RAM, the maps in Ghost Babel are surprisingly large and packed with detail. The sprawling outside military facility feels heavily guarded with soldiers and surveillance cameras, delivering that classic MGS experience. There's no waypoints, no hand-holding, all you have is the intel team that provides you information. The rest, well, that's on you. Stage 2 is a prime example of how this game challenges the player. You're tasked with making your way into lower drainage channels beneath the base, but it's easier to get confused on a first playthrough. Once you grab the first level keycard and enter a small compound, you spot ladders behind walls, but here's the catch, there's no obvious door. From the courtyard it just looks like a solid wall. But this is where the brilliance of Ghost Babel shines through. You have to think and observe and experiment with your surroundings. It's a refreshing challenge that forces you to slow down and engage with the level design. Stage 3 shakes things up as we head into Galuade's underground section. This level design doesn't lose its edge here, it keeps that challenging vibe. Puddles are scattered everywhere, meaning you can't just sprint past guards, instead you've got to learn their movement patterns, wait for the right moment and find that perfect opening. Things really get fun once you hit the drainage channels. Here, massive tidal waves come crashing in rhythmic patterns, forcing you to time your moves and make a break for it. The tension ramps up as you inch forward, grabbing onto ladders just at the right moment to avoid getting swept away. It's an exhilarating sequence that tests your patience and timing. But once you get out of there, the game drops you back into a packed facility with patrolling guards and laser sensors. Not to mention also the rooms that are filled with gas, requiring the player to have essential items. It's all a nice nod to the MSX Metal Gear games. The next twist feels familiar to Metal Gear 2 fans. You're tasked with locating someone in disguise, just like you did with Gustava, but this time it's Chris who's hiding amongst enemy soldiers. The key? You've got to spot her distinctive features, a red cap and her hair tied back. But it's not that simple. Some guards are designed to throw you off. It's a fun level that keeps you sharp, urging you to stay observant and to think on your feet. Stage 4 introduces some fresh gameplay mechanics that shake things up. Here we're tasked with following Chris through the facility, and we do this several times. But it's not as simple as it sounds. Snake doesn't have a disguise to just stroll through undetected. You've got to keep an eye on Chris while sneaking past guards. And as the level progresses, the challenge ramps up significantly. And once we make it outside, we witness a guard pressing buttons on several panels that control multiple doors. Unlike the guard though, we've got to punch through those buttons in perfect sequence to advance. It's a tricky segment where precision matters, and the difficulty escalates from there. Birds are scattered on the ground, will take flight if startled, triggering an instant alert. So this forces you to move more carefully, choosing specific spots to avoid detection. And things even get more unforgiving when the attack dogs show up, reminiscent of the original Metal Gear. These dogs are relentless and simply running past them rarely works. You've got to rely on sneaking skills to avoid getting torn to shreds. So by now you're probably wondering, what is the story all about? Well, the game is set in 2002, 7 years after the Outer Heaven uprising. A US transport plane carrying a Metal Gear prototype codenamed Gander is hijacked by the Gander Liberation Front, a separatist rebel group led by General Agustin Agabon. Their plan? Use Metal Gear to win an ongoing civil war. Colonel Roy Campbell, now retired, convinces Solid Snake to undertake one last mission: infiltrate Galuade, formerly known as Outer Heaven, rescue the kidnapped researchers, and destroy Metal Gear before it's completed. However, Snake soon finds himself facing the Black Chamber, a rogue US Army Special Forces unit founded as a covert counterpart to Foxhound. Black Chamber specialised in black operations, assassinations, Civil War interventions, and eliminating anti-American entities. 2 years before the events of the game, Foxhound ambushed and wiped out Black Chamber under Campbell's command, though he believed he was targeting terrorists. 5 members survived along vowing revenge. They resurfaced in 2002, aligning with Grenada's Liberation Front and serving as key antagonists in the Galuade incident. These remaining members of the Black Chamber act as the game's major boss battles. The first boss of Stage 4 is Slasher Hawk, an Australian warrior raised as an Aborigine. He brings an almost mystical presence to the battlefield, accompanied by a hawk he rescued as an orphan chick. On a war-torn battlefield, much like Vulcan Raven in Metal Gear Solid 1, who was often seen with a raven perched on his shoulder. Hawk's bond with his bird gives him a strikingly similar aura of danger and connection to nature. Gameplay-wise, this fight is a standout and arguably the highlight of Stage 4. Slasher Hawk wields 2 massive 5-foot boomerangs, razor sharp and deadly. The fight unfolds in 2 stages, each ramping up the challenge and intensity. At first, Hawk throws his boomerangs in wide arcs, forcing the player to move with precision. It's a delicate dance of dodging incoming attacks whilst retaliating. Snake's grenades, of course, come in handy here. They've practically become Snake's weapon of choice for taking down everything from tanks to choppers, you name it, including an Australian fella.
G'day, mate.
Stage 5 delivers one of the most standout and intricate segments, and it's a treat for long-time fans. At its core, the section revolves around a massive box distribution conveyor belt system, a direct callback to the MSX Metal Gear games. And interestingly, it also foreshadows the smaller scale conveyor belt puzzle seen a year later in Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, during the Shell 1 core sequence. And any boxes that you collected over the course of the game could transport you to different parts of the shell. The conveyor belt system is a puzzle-driven challenge that relies on the player's ability to navigate and manipulate the system itself. At first, Snake begins utilising a yellow box to ride the conveyor belt into different rooms. The goal is to collect different coloured boxes, each corresponding to the conveyor belt's colour-coded pathways. And it's the mechanic that forces players to think strategically, switching boxes on the conveyor belt to transport themselves to specific locations within the facility. And the primary goal of Stage 6 is to rescue Jimmy Hart, a teenage genius and the lead developer of Metal Gear Gander. Jimmy's knowledge is critical once again for Snake to learn how to stop a Metal Gear, but finding him isn't as straightforward as one might think. Once again, there is no waypoints, unlike modern hand-holding mechanics. There's no guide. The design encourages exploration, trial and error, and sharp observational skills. Truth be told, when I first played this, I was looking around for at least an hour until I found the location. While some players might initially assume a solution like blowing a nearby wall was the correct path, just as I did, it requires actually heading back to the second floor conveyor belt room and heading into one of the rooms. Here, Snake can blast through a specific wall to locate and free Jimmy. And the best part of it all is that you don't even have to babysit the guy, you can move on straight to the next stage. Stage 6 culminates in a chilling boss battle against Marionette Owl, a character whose very presence drips with eerie tension. Owl's unsettling design and twisted backstory set him apart as one of the most unique bosses in Metal Gear Solid. Marionette Owl's abilities stem from a genetic mutation that granted him night vision comparable to an owl's, but this made him a master of nocturnal combat and a lethal force for silent kills. However, his night-piercing eyes would shimmer in the dark like a cat's, so Owl always wore tinted goggles even in pitch-black conditions. But the horror doesn't stop there. Owl, once a notorious serial killer dubbed the Spectre Killer by the media. Known for his grisly methods, he crafted his signature Bunraku-style marionette dolls using the severed limbs of his victims. It is as grotesque as it is unsettling, and he even taunts Snake mid-battle, eerily threatening to use Snake's limbs to build his next macabre masterpiece. This morbid detail immediately brings to mind Screaming Mantis from MGS4, who wields two dolls representing Psycho Mantis and the Sorrow. It's hard to ignore the likelihood that Ghost Babel planted the seeds of inspiration for that later boss design. Thermal goggles are the real MVP here. Unlike the night vision goggles which can be completely blinded by stun grenades, thermals help Snake keep track of Owl's movements and the marionettes. Sticking to this strategy makes what could have been a trickier fight relatively manageable. One also just uses an automatic machine gun to spray the decoys in order to find the real character. What makes this scene during Marionette Owl's death stand out is a specific piece of dialogue about Viper, one of the Black Chamber's leader. And he's actually named after a poisonous snake, and I definitely can't help but think that this is somehow linked to the events of MGS5 in 1984. Perhaps maybe a subtle reference to the likes of Venom Snake, the lead protagonist. But anyway, Owl reveals that Viper lost his left arm and refuses to use prosthetics, or if he does, he barely wears them. This immediately struck me as a similar event in MGS5, where Kazuhira Miller chooses not to use mechanical limbs, instead keeping his physical loss as a constant reminder of the pain he's endured and the comrades he's lost.
Forget it. I've no intention of relying on bionics. Right now I need to keep the pain fresh in my mind.
Well, it's your decision. But don't you find it inconvenient?
Not a bit. But the phantom pain, it never lets up. Do you know how many men I saw die that day? There's nothing we can do to bring them back. And you expect me to care about getting a measly arm and leg back? Sorry. But my pain belongs to all our dead comrades.
Ghost Babel is often considered not really canonically intertwined in terms of real-world events, but it does hold some canonicity, and it's very profound, so go ahead and skip later into the video if you want to know more about it, or just stick along for the ride until we get there. So we're on to stage 7, and I thought I'd save the game. Mei Ling offering her signature advice like she does before previously adds that nice little touch, reminding us that we can't do two things at once, and giving us some grief for trying to do something else whilst playing the game. I mean, Mei Ling, haven't you heard of such thing called multitasking?
That's a ladies' bathroom.
I know that. Some bear'll come in here.
So you're waiting after her? Are you some kind of pervert? I won't let you save your mission now.
Listen,
The codec features are such a staple of the game, and it's nice to see them implemented in an unsung hero like Ghost Babel. After some light backtracking, the challenge ramps up this time, as Snake finds himself in a massive minefield, which is classic Metal Gear through and through. Moving forward feels almost impossible without getting blown apart. It's recommended that you bring the mine detector, unless you've left it at home, then you're screwed. The standout moment comes when Viper makes his dramatic return, piloting a Hind D. Snake soon discovers that Metal Gear Gander has already surfaced in a tense sequence. Gander fires a fake nuclear warhead, prompting Snake to make a tactical retreat as the area comes under heavy bombardment. and this adds a cool gameplay element, requiring players to evade explosions whilst retreating to safety. After Snake regroups, Campbell contacts him explaining that the warhead landed harmlessly in an unpopulated area of Nevada. It was a bluff, a fake nuke, meant to demonstrate the GLF's nuclear capabilities and pressure the US into withdrawing its peacekeeping forces. Stage 8 ramps up the intensity, tasking us with blowing up a power plant to stop Metal Gear Gander from firing yet another warhead. This section is a treat for Nikita missile enthusiasts, arguably the most intense use of the weapon in the series. The power plant is covered in electrified floors, forcing you to carefully navigate each area. You also have to avoid puddles due to live electrical currents, while trapdoors and moving between floors keep you on edge the entire time. On top of that, gun-equipped cameras will shoot down your missiles if you're not fast enough, so timing and precision is everything. Even getting the Nikita missile launcher is a challenge, requiring careful navigation through pylons. It's easy to take a wrong turn and having to backtrack. Once equipped, you're tasked with destroying multiple panels, all while avoiding enemy fire and potential environmental hazards. And at the end of the stage, Snake faces off against Pyro Bison, a member of the Black Chamber and a pyromaniac, specialising in flamethrowers. Bison's combat style and fiery attacks are very reminiscent of the Fury in MGS3.
I am the Fury! The flames of my rage will incinerate you.
Bullets have little effect on him, so it's best to stay in cover. Use grenades and time your attacks carefully, because his fire rain attack can deal significant damage if you're not prepared, making him one of the most toughest bosses so far. After defeating him, Bison reveals critical details to Snake. That Black Chamber was a special forces group that took on missions Foxhound couldn't after becoming too famous, allowing Operation Intrude N313. He also drops a bombshell that there's a spy in their ranks. This is a key moment that ties Ghost Babel's lore closer to the main series, with Black Chamber feeling like a precursor to XOF in MGS5, a strike force operating in the shadows to provide backup and support to Fox. It's moments like this that show how Ghost Babel, despite being overlooked, feels like an important piece of Metal Gear history, with some ideas that clearly inspired elements in the mainline titles. Stage 9 keeps things simple, yet incredibly fun. After placing explosives on the weak points of the power plant and blowing it sky high, the game shifts into full-on escape mode. You're given just a few minutes on the clock to make your way out before the entire structure collapses. This escape sequence brings a refreshing change of pace, a hallmark of the Metal Gear design, forcing you to think quickly under pressure, similar to previous entries in the series. You'll need to dodge the flames and navigate around debris and carefully plot your route whilst the timer relentlessly counts down. It's classic Metal Gear moments, blending stealth mechanics with frantic movement. With the plant destroyed, the nuclear threat is far from over. McBride informs Snake that 4 FF-22 jets have been dispatched to clear out the artillery blocking the path forward. Now outside, Snake stumbles upon a grim scene. Jimmy, still in handcuffs, stands next to the corpse of a dead soldier. Jimmy reveals to Snake that he managed to escape captivity when the plant was blown up, but he wasn't alone. Another prisoner, a Delta Force operative, had escaped alongside him. However, before Snake could get more information, Jimmy's handcuffs explode, instantly killing him. Stage 10 throws us straight into another intense challenge, with the stakes getting even higher. Suspicion starts creeping in about Chris, Snake's resistance ally, potentially being an insider. Before there's any chance to dig deeper, Snake is attacked again, this time by the same Hind D from earlier, now piloted by the General Second in Command, Sophie Endram. The fight is brutal and chaotic to say the least, without the luxury of a Stinger missile launcher. This time we are forced to rely on grenades alone. The Hind moves unpredictably, shifting positions across the map, making every throw a test of timing and precision. One wrong move and you're left exposed to a barrage of devastating firepower. The Hind constantly dishes out ridiculous damage, keeping you always on the move. It's a tough battle requiring patience, careful positioning, and split-second decisions. After taking down the helicopter, Snake lets Sophie go and moves on. There's no time to think about it, though Chris is still alive. But Viper's got her, so we push deeper into another facility, and it's here where things get a bit tricky again. We're back to using the Nikita missile launcher to destroy control panels and make a path forward. At this point you'll know the drill, but it still keeps you on your toes. After that you hop onto an elevator and this one just keeps going down and down, and you start to wonder how deep this place actually is. Eventually you hit the lower levels and everything's pitch black. You'll need to pull out either your thermal goggles or night vision because the room is full of trapdoors. You need to figure out the right wall to blow up to make progress. It's a nice challenge that just breaks things up a little bit and combines all the previous elements. Then comes another elevator ride. This one drops you down to a massive 97 floors. And when you step out, you finally see it. Metal Gear Gander. So go ahead, have a gander. Even in 8-bit, this looks epic, and you really get a sense of its scale. But we're not done here yet. There's one more elevator, and this one takes you all the way down to the 100th floor. Just as it stops, you hear Metal Gear is active, and you know things are about to kick off. If the player decides not to head directly to the hangar where Metal Gear Gander awaits, there's an interesting moment on the left side door. This room should be instantly familiar to longtime fans. It's the exact area where Snake fought Metal Gear TX55 back in the original Metal Gear. The fact that this game is set in Outer Heaven gives it even more weight, and seeing the remnants of that past battle really adds to the atmosphere. If you take the time to call Campbell in this room, you're treated to some interesting dialogue. Campbell reflects on Snake's previous mission, reminding the player of that history while adding a layer of nostalgia and continuity. It's a small but yet powerful detail that ties Ghost Babel in with a larger Metal Gear lore. That even if it's considered an alternative universe, the series' roots are never really too far away. In Stage 11 you face Viper, the leader of Black Chamber. The battle here is a big step up, requiring more strategy and critical thinking than most previous fights. Viper's use of line traps changes the dynamic, forcing you not only to be cautious, but also to remember where the traps are located, especially as they go invisible. Once you shoot Viper, the best tactic is to stick close to him, and this allows you to avoid his attacks while keeping him in your sights. It's a careful balancing act of defense and attack. After defeating Viper, Chris reveals her backstory. She survived the Delta Force massacre because she was not with the team at the time. She had been given secret orders by John Parker to destroy all data regarding Project Babel and Outer Heaven, as well as to assassinate the General. And with this revelation, the stage shifts into the next part of the mission, the final confrontation with Metal Gear Gander. This fight against Metal Gear Gander in the hangar is one of the most memorable in the game. The General activates Gander and the battle begins, with a familiar objective placing bombs on its legs to disable it. However, this time the stakes are even higher. Gander is far more mobile than any previous Metal Gear, making the task more challenging. Once the legs are destroyed, the battle shifts gears. Gander fires massive turrets at you while sending out drones to track and shoot you. It's a high stakes fight that brings to mind battles from other titles in the series, like Chrysalis in Peace Walker and Salamthropus in MGS5, both of which feature drones and require precise timing to escape. The challenge is intense, and rations are highly recommended for survival in the final phase. Gander attempts to use flamethrowers towards the end, but with careful timing you can finish it off with grenades, marking an epic conclusion to this battle. After Metal Gear Gander is destroyed, the General reveals the shocking truth behind the events leading up to Outer Heaven, and the US's involvement. He explains that Outer Heaven was initially a US-funded project meant to investigate anti-US forces. However, the operation went awry when Big Boss, the field commander, rebelled, leading to Operation Intrude N313. After the destruction of Outer Heaven, the US continued its covert relationship with Gander, the General's faction, until the formation of Project Babel. The project of Project Babel was to position the US as the uncontested superpower in Africa, spearheaded by John Parker, the Army Chief of Staff. As the General dies, he passes Snake a disc containing the data on Project Babel, seemingly concluding the mission. But just as Snake thinks it's over, Viper makes a return, revealing that he knows the identity of Anonymous, the puppet masters behind the events. No doubt a reference to the Patriots, the shadowy figures who would go on to become central antagonists in the Metal Gear series. And the lying traitor the entire time was already on our team, and it turns out that it was actually McBride. In the final stages of Metal Gear Ghost Babel, Snake faces off against Viper in an intense showdown. The battle isn't overly complicated, but it demands precision, and grenades are the best weapon to use here, though you need to avoid getting too close to Viper, as he'll hit you with a devastating shockwave. Once Viper is defeated, the nuclear system is deactivated and Snake emerges victorious. Snake receives a call from Campbell, who expresses regrets, explaining that he didn't know that Black Chamber was a US unit until the aftermath. Weasel then reveals to Snake that he killed McBride upon hearing about Campbell's confession about his past for Black Chamber, including how he was blackmailed into participating into the operation by Gardner. Snake connects the dots. He recalls what both Viper and Ergobon had mentioned about Project Babel, deducing with Weasel's confirmation that Gardner is anonymous. Project Babel was initially created by Gardner, but he lost control after Metal Gear was seized by South American terrorists. Control was later transferred to Parker. Gardner orchestrated the entire operation to disguise Parker and reclaim control of Project Babel. And with that, Snake and Chris said their goodbyes to Sophie and Dram as they leave together. Weasel had been under Gardner's orders the entire time, but in the end he left everyone to go free, choosing not to carry out the order to kill. Chris reappears with a jeep she found, and she and Snake drive off together. As they drive, Chris explains how she joined the army in search for a place where absolute right and wrong existed, but eventually realised that she had to look for it on her own. Snake shares his own experience, explaining that he thought returning to Outer Heaven would settle the score of his past, but he ultimately realised it was about seeking death because he was afraid of facing what he truly was. He admits that thanks to Chris, he found salvation and intends to forgive himself for his past mistakes. He also reveals his intention to return to the United States, knowing that Foxhound will likely ambush him. He plans to confront the faceless men who manipulated people's lives, referring to Parker and Gardner, and make them pay. And after all that, he will return to Chris. And with that is the end of Ghost Babel's story, but we're not quite done yet.
Not over. Not yet.
Your mission is to infiltrate the Fortress Galluade, rescue the hostages, and neutralize Metal Gear before its assembly is complete.
After completing Ghost Babel, you might think the journey ends there. Wrong. Finishing the main game unlocks something called Special Missions, which are essentially a set of virtual reality simulations recreating events inspired by Solid Snake's legendary missions. The first stage introduces an AI system called Number 4, which oversees the program and monitors your performance. The AI explains that you'll be reenacting key missions with specific conditions, like completing objectives without being spotted or collecting items similar to Ground Zero's Fox patches, and in Ghost Babel it's Foxhound patches instead. These scenarios feel profound, raising questions about the connection to other entries in the series. Could they hint at a deeper Patriot project? One stage, for instance, tasks you with meeting Mei Ling, only for her to keep moving to new locations, creating a hide-and-seek challenge. Another involves hunting for Ghost, a mechanic later reintroduced into Peace Walker, where you snap photos of spectres. But the real twist comes into the final stage. The AI congratulates you, revealing that your skills now surpass that of Solid Snake and that you should prepare for the future. It ominously addresses you as Jack, a direct reference to Raiden. This heavily implies that the entire training program was part of the Patriots VR simulations designed to prepare Raiden for deployment at the Big Shell.
I remember this place.
Of course you do. This is level 1 from the VR missions.
You're right. I see it now.
You may not have field experience, but you've been trained in the hyper-reality of simulated combat. Don't give in to fear. Just do as you were trained and everything will be all right.
I feel like I know this terrain. Wasn't it in the VR training?
Nikita weapon mode, level 4. Do you recognize it?
Oh, so that was another rehearsal for this mission.
No, a simulation. Not the same thing as a rehearsal. Leverage the experience from your VR training, Raiden. A perfectly real VR experience is in itself an accomplished result. Have confidence in your abilities.
Even more intriguingly, this suggests Ghost Babel may hold a form of canon city within the Metal Gear series. It aligns with MGS2, where Raiden undergoes VR training based on Solid Snake's missions, including Shadow Moses and the tanker incident.
Where were you before Foxhound? Delta Force?
I was part of the Army's Force 21 trials.
Force 21? That's about tactical IT deployment, right? Any field experience?
No, not really.
So this is your first.
I've had extensive training, the kind that's indistinguishable from the real thing.
Like what?
Sneaking mission 60, weapons 80, advanced...
VR, huh?
I've gone through VR training of the tanker mission before.
Yeah? Well, I doubt it accurately simulates the events of that mission.
The AI statement is actually a reflection of Hideo Kojima's to the fans. Your time is about to come, referring to the fact that he's already been working on Metal Gear Solid 2 and come up with the idea of Jack, or Raiden should we say. It supports the idea that Raiden's Big Shell mission was prepped through simulations just like these. If anything, Ghost Babel could serve as the missing link in the Patriots simulation projects, perhaps even explaining discrepancies in Ground Zero's or Venom Snake's narrative. These inconsistencies might stem from their reliance on simulations rather than true historical events.
Raiden, turn the game console off right now.
What did you say?
The mission is a failure. Cut the power right now.
What's wrong with you?
Don't worry, it's a game. It's a game just like usual.
Anyway, with that being said, thanks for watching. You know what to do. Leave a comment down below and let me know your thoughts on this classic Metal Gear title that hit the Game Boy Color. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to like the video, as it really helps push it out to a larger audience. I'm the Voice Box, and until we meet again.
Politics, the military, the economy, they control it all. They even choose who becomes president. Putting it simply, the Patriots rule this country.
No.
Hard to believe, isn't it?